A great evening to you and a warm welcome to Prime Business with me, Pius Kojo Baka. In our very first story, President John Dramani Mahama has urged Finance Minister Dr. Kaseo Latufosin to work at controlling inflation and bringing Ghana's debt to sustainable levels. Speaking after swearing in 6 ministers approved by Parliament, President John Mahama entreated the ministers to work to improve the living conditions of Ghanaians.
I've just sworn you in the first 6 ministers who are responsible for perhaps the most critical sectors of our national life, especially the economy and the energy sector. In economy, the people of Ghana are looking up to you, Dr. Fosin, to reduce inflation and make life more affordable, reduce the cost of living. They're looking up to you to bring our debt level to bring our national debt to sustainable levels. They're looking to you to stabilize our currency, and they're looking to you to rein in the deficit so that we can achieve macroeconomic stability.
He also called on the Energy Minister, John Jinapor, to find prudent solutions to address challenges in the energy sector.
To you, the Honorable Minister of Energy, Mr. John Jinapor, Ghanaians are looking for stable and efficient power supply. They are looking to you to accelerate our upstream and downstream petroleum sectors in order that Ghanaians can reap the benefit of the potential that God has given us. They're also looking to you to manage the energy sector debt and be able to remove it as an albatross around the neck of our economy.
Now, the Minister of Trade, Agribusiness and Industry designate, Elizabeth Ofosu-Adjare, has stated that the 24-hour economy policy will be used to solve challenges encountered in the implementation of the One District, One Factory program rolled out by the former government. Appearing before Parliament's Appointment Committee earlier this morning, Madam Ofosu-Adjare pointed out that the program is good but had many challenges that must be corrected to make the policy effective.
Companies have not proceeded the way the government intentioned it to be. Again, even though government supported them with some inputs, they lack capital. And because of lack of access to capital, they've not been able to do their work as expected of them. And if you look at the other 1D, 1F companies that signed on to the program, their major challenge is the fact that you recall, Honorable Chair, that government capped their interest rates at 20%, and government promised to pay 10% for them, which was a very good program. But somewhere along the line, the interest rates shot to 35%. So now the problem the companies have is who pays the difference of 15%, because they have already sold their products calculated at an interest of 10%. And one thing government has also not been able to do is to pay the extra 10% that it promised these manufacturers. They also have the issue of raw materials, and we know that issue of raw material availability did not start today. It's been there for long, and it has worried our industry. That is why our industries have not grown to the levels we want. So these are the challenges of the 1D, 1F, but there is always a solution to problems. It is good that it has started. Now that we know the challenges, how are we going to solve it going forward? I see the solution in the 24-hour economy. Because, Honorable Chair, in the 24-hour economy, businesses are going to receive incentives. In the 24-hour economy, agribusiness is going to play a key role. And in the agribusiness role, we are going to do commercial contract farming. The commercial contract farming is going to solve the raw materials problem to a very large extent. In so doing, these factories that have signed on the 1D, 1F, I'm sure will sign on the 24-hour economy and get a benefit of the raw material availability. They'll get the benefit of the tax holidays. They'll get the benefit of the stimulus packages they will get. And I think that it is Ghana. These industries are not political. They are looking for what a country can do for them. What the NPP did for them, they have taken it. What the NDC will add to them will make them even better.
Well, she is also optimistic about improving Ghana's trade balance by adding value to the nation's raw materials before export. She shared these during the Ministerial Vetting in Parliament.
we have to work on the production of raw materials in this country. I have indicated that under the agribusiness, we are going to do contract commercial farming, and it's going to make available raw materials in Ghana. If we get raw materials in Ghana, two things will happen. Firstly, our importation of the raw materials will reduce, and we know what happens to our trade balance when we are importing more. When we are, importing less. And so, when we have raw materials in Ghana and we import less, it will be good for us. Two, the raw materials coming into this country are what give us the problem with our foreign exchange. So that one also be catered for. Once we have the raw materials in the country, the essence is value addition. So when we add value to our raw materials, it will also decrease the number of the finished product that we import. So the import will reduce in two folds. The import of raw materials will decrease. The import of the finished product will also decrease because we'll be having them in country. With the 24-hour economy again, more production will happen and our exports will improve. If we are exporting more, it shows that we are getting more foreign exchange. Again, we have, these are in respect of non-traditional exports. We also be looking at adding value to our traditional exports like cocoa and gold, because since time immemorial, we've been exporting our raw beans. With agri-processing, we can process our gold in two folds, semi-processed and then final process. We can have the semi-processed materials by, for example, if you have cocoa, adding value to make it powder, exporting it for same to be used for chocolate or drinks. We can also add value to a finished product like chocolate. And so if we are now adding value to our traditional exports in addition to our non-traditional exports, you know what will happen to our export numbers. That is how I seek to improve our trade balance.
So is reducing the import of raw materials the best bet of solving the agribusiness industry challenges? Let's have some statistics on that. And my colleague Isaac Atasenyako joins me in studio to help us understand all of this. Isaac, thanks so much for joining me on Prime Business.
Welcome, Pius.
First off, break it down for us. What is the figure looking like when we have the raw materials for imports?
Now, let's move straight to the slide, Pius. Now, if we look at this slide, you realize this is a trend showing a percentage of agric raw materials or imports of agric raw materials to our total import. Now, let's look at this from 2017, 2018, 2019. Now, we see that 2020 is missing. Now, this spike we have here accounts for 2020. Now, clearly within that whole period of COVID where the lockdown happened, a lot did not happen. And so we're not able to produce much, but rather rely on foreign imports. Now, this continued, sort of declined a bit in 2021. And then it dipped down further in 2022, but we saw another surge in 2023. Now, in 2022, we all know what happened. Russia declaring war on Ukraine. Now, this led to another spike in the increase in raw materials exportation. Importation, actually. Now, why this is important is because now a country like Russia, for instance, one of the high producing countries for cereals. Now, we rely on a lot of cereals here in our country. Now, if we look at something like flour, for instance, the bread we eat, the biscuits we consume, now when you come to our factories also, they rely on a lot of these raw materials. Let's look at sugar products, sugarcane, for instance. We all know what happened to the Commander Sugar Factory, having to, stall its rollout because of the lack of raw materials. Now, sugar is also very essential. It forms as adjectives to a lot of the food juices we have here, as a sweetener, as a base. For a lot of, food products we have on the market, fruits, for instance. Now, some of these companies produce by specification. And so if we are not able to get the right specification for, let's say, pineapple, for instance, a confit juice may not be able to produce because it exports to other countries, the EU countries for that matter. And so if a confit juice does not get that, fruit or the specification of fruits needed here in Ghana, it may have to import. And all of these accounted for what we see here. We'll move on to the next slide now.
And I'm interested in the cost.
Yes, so averagely, it costs us about $33.4 million. You know, this was computed between 2017 to about 2022. Now, this is how the figure is looking like on how much we spend on, you know, the importation of agri raw materials. But you know what's interesting here, Pius? Moving on to the next slide. Now, this raw material sourcing composition, just 10% of our raw materials are sourced here in Ghana, 90% imported. Now, the actions or inactions of the minister designate now, Elizabeth Ofosu-Adjare for trade, agribusiness and industry, would have a lot to do here to improve this percentage. Now, a lot of the things she said seems to be very good. I mean, you and I have had this conversation in the office, engaged a lot of industry people, and the question is always how. Now, if she's able to implement all the things she said, hopefully in the next couple of years, we should be seeing some appreciation when it comes to sourcing of raw materials for our industries or agri raw materials for our industries locally. And so hopefully the next time I should be here, we should see an increase in here. But to the next slide again.
Is that feasible, really?
It's very feasible. I mean, a lot of people have said in the past that we've not been intentional enough. And also with regards to, you know, some hands in government, you know, not willing to take certain decisions because some people benefit from the current system we have here. But it's very feasible. I mean, countries like Malaysia have been able to do it. They started just like us. We're even better than them just when we had independence. And so it's very feasible. Now, let's look at this figure, $100 million. The cost of sourcing from here in Ghana, and then $350 million sourcing from elsewhere. Now, what this means is that if we're able to improve on growing raw materials here, we'll be adding more to our economy. And so in the next couple of years, hopefully, we won't be seeing $100 million on the slide. We'll be seeing something, let's say, more than this, say about 300 million. Now, what that means is that it adds to our economy, the value chain, for instance. All actors within the value chain will begin to benefit from this. We always say that agri has the potential to grow, Pius. And if we're able to put in the right measures, the right policies, we should see our economy grow and our agri sector, for that matter, grow. And once agri grows, I mean, we depend on a lot on food, on maize, cereals, and others. And once agri grows, it's going to have that ripple effect on other parts of the economy. Pius.
All right, Isaac, thank you so much for joining me in studio for that thorough breakdown for us in relation to the numbers when it comes to our importation of raw materials. Well, thankfully, joining me now is the Chief Executive of the Chamber of Agribusiness Ghana, Anthony Morrison. He joins us via phone. Anthony, thanks so much for joining me on Prime Business. I'm grateful you could join me once more. Now, you may have watched the Minister Designate for Trade and Industry, Elizabeth Ofosu-Adjare, and I want to know your impressions so far. But unfortunately, it seems we've lost Anthony Morrison. As and when we bring him on, we shall speak to him on the subject matter. But let's touch on the story before we go to Anthony. Tax analyst Francis Timoboy is urging the newly appointed Commissioner of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Anthony Sapong, to focus on improving compliance in the collection of taxes. According to him, despite the authority meeting its revenue target, improving compliance will help rake in more revenue rather than introducing new tax handles.
Currently, businesses are saying that taxes are too many in this country. And so even as much as the government is saying that they're not going to introduce new taxes, my fear is that if we attempt to introduce any new taxes, there may be a backlash. So the expectation is that he should focus more on the compliance, as the Minister of Finance has already stated. If we focus on enforcing the existing taxes, I believe that he'll be able to maintain the momentum that the Ghana Revenue Authority is, achieving. Over the years, you realize that from 2020, they've been able to achieve their revenue target and sometimes even going beyond it. Any attempt to introduce new taxes are likely to be met with stiff opposition from the business community.
Apart from compliance, which other areas should he focus on?
No, I think some of the tax handles we've left very untouched. If you look at the 153 billion cities that the GRA says they've achieved, the last time I checked, you realize that some tax handles which are contributing so much include rent taxes. Rent tax is something that the GRA sometimes they don't even budget for it because the revenue that they collect from that place is very small. But this time, is coming in a lot. So.
All right, so I want us to go back to our earlier story in relation to the importation of raw materials and, of course, the appearance of the Minister-designate for Trade, Agribusiness and Industry, Elizabeth Ofosu-Adjare. But joining us via phone now is the Chief Executive of the Chamber of Agribusiness Ghana, Anthony Morrison. Anthony, thanks so much once again for joining us on Prime Business. And you have called for the consolidation of agribusiness in the scheme of government's policies, etc. Now, the Minister-designate for Trade, Agribusiness and Industry appeared before the appointment committee earlier this morning. Your impression?
Well, thank you, Pius. I think this was a very good vetting process. Just that the industry was expecting more from our parliamentarians to ask more leading questions, especially what is pertaining to the industry, the ease of doing business, issues with institutional alignment of government, and how to make a very innovative programs which will have a more impact on the SME and also on the private sector. First, we're looking at her area of the proposal she put up, which of course inviting the private sector on board. But we need to take this discussion to a bigger level. Agribusiness has now been added to MOTI. We need now to make the industrialization aspect more intentional. How do we tease out the agribusiness in a way that will see the relevance and its activities that will impact on the industry? And this is where the Chamber is calling for the establishment of the Agribusiness and Industry Development Regulatory Authority. This is where we will have in line or align all the other parameters. The value chain analysis will be done based on the institutionalization of the Raw Material Council, where we will actually look at all the raw materials that we have in Ghana in commercial terms and look at the priorities of this country and sort to do a better analysis, align them to the national market or the domestic market, and also in terms of the global market. In doing so, we'll be creating more jobs, we'll be establishing more factories, and we'll also be uplifting a lot of people from poverty and giving them a social class. So there are a number of things that need to be put in its right perspective for it to make meaningful analysis to the general public.
All right, so for us here, we are really concerned about the importation of raw materials, which we are looking at reducing that. But for you, what pragmatic steps would you propose that we need to take a look at to reduce the import of raw materials in order to boost the agribusiness industry?
So one of the issues that I said is to set up the Raw Material Council here in Ghana. Most of the raw materials we import is because we have not properly aligned the raw material availability of the country to feed the industry. So what do? You look at how you can do a more better agro-industrialization. I have always believed in the private sector, large-scale commercial farming to coexist with the small-scale farmer processes. So we need to find a way where in each region, at least, we can count between 2,000 to 5,000 of commercial farms. And let's not get it mixed. Tractorization and mechanization are quite different things. So we need to see a system that is actually being set up, that is providing for the industries and the factories.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, Anthony Morrison, Chief Executive of the Chamber of Agribusiness Ghana, for your input at this very moment. And that's it for Prime Business for today. I am Pius Kojo Baka. Let's connect same time tomorrow.